mean, we're going to be talking for an hour. I'm sure we want to invite everybody to listen to us talk for an hour.
Yeah.
So we're it's in between. What Richard was saying there is we're going to do the interview that we teased with the director of Making Apes, the documentary about making the makeup for the classic films. We're doing that basically an hour. So not saying that this in between is going to go forever, but we were trying to find ways to fill that time. And Sean works for an auction house. Do you want to say?
Yeah, it's Heritage Auctions.
And he's showing me, while Richard looks at comic book orders and whatnot, he was showing me a lot of the stuff on the auction site, some of it being Planet of the Apes.
July, yeah. It's got a lot of movie memorabilia and posters and stuff like that.
And we got to talking a bit about what time does to these things, because one of the things that they're auctioning is one of the gorilla pullover masks. And I'm jokingly said to Sean, after so much time, this latex appliance, it's easily one of the creepiest looking things because it's almost like a melted monkey face instead of looking like it was. But we got into the talk of you buy these kind of things. We joked this week how I was going to get rid of my family so I could afford more. And we all enjoy this world. But outside of some of these higher end things, you're going to buy things that fall apart over time.
Well, it's I'm actually kind of surprised that paper can last as long as it does if it's protected and kept away from moisture and light and
acid and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. If you can kind of extend the life of paper, but plastic itself will just kind of break down on its own. And we were talking about
foam latex.
I'm sure the Planet of the Apes fans were familiar with a lot of the toys that they created. There was a company called Mego that created these fantastic little 8-inch figures that had cloth bodies, and there were Planet of the Apes figures, there were Star Trek figures, there were superhero ones, and so on. Well, those original toys were created with rubber bands that connected the joints, which allowed them to kind of move a little bit more. They weren't snap-in like a lot of the more modern toys. Well, it's not uncommon now to find several of those where the band itself is just broken down because of the inferior plastic. You could even find, in the mint-in package figures whose limbs have started to kind of fall off because the rubber band itself has just deteriorated over time. You'll see some of the plastic faces that used to be kind of a bright pale color or brown color start to turn to a white color. You'll see little dots on the nose where the nose is pressing into plastic and it's breaking down. The cloth is going to last a while, but the plastic itself may not. I have some of those figures myself. I loved the Mego line, the diversity with which they made of all the characters. It was kind of the Star Wars figures before Star Wars figures, if you will. And quite a few of them, they're just kind of breaking down and falling apart. Yeah.
They were the first figures that I played with as a kid, and I'd sometimes wonder if one of my reasons for loving Batman as much as I do is my original Amigo of Batman was the one before that you could actually take his
mask off. Yeah.
And there was something to me about that dual identity of actually on off, and I think that probably cemented that in my head, because to this day, in fact, if you look up on my shelves, one of my favorite, on the second from the top Batman shelf, there is a Bruce Wayne with the cowl down.
Yeah.
And that's easily... There are two things I love in Batman. I want to see that character beat up and the costume ripped, or I want to see the cowl off. And it's something about the humanity behind that I love. And I go back to that Mego character, and I wish that and I'm sure I probably could find one of those. I would just have to pay for it. But
I don't think it would be too terribly hard to find. The prices on the figures themselves aren't really that much.
Really?
I mean, you can find them anywhere from like $50 to $100, $200 at most. They're not too expensive. You just got to find one. You got to find one in a condition that you're willing to pay, whether it's in package or out of the package. And what you might want is just a loose one. You may not need it on the original.
That's what I would want. Yeah.
You may not originally need it on the carded figure. I've collected those. I've got several of the Migos, specifically the superhero line, because I was into that. And then a little bit later, when the Star Wars figures kind of came out and became really popular, I collected those because I was also 7, 8, and 9 during a lot of those times when those figures came out. There was a Superpowers line, which Kenner put together of Justice League characters, and I was a big fan of the Justice League, so I collected a lot of those. I have a lot of those. Now, those are going to last a little bit longer because they were using a better plastic. Like I was mentioning with the Migos, since they had that plastic bubble that was glued onto a package, even some of the Superpowers figures, what you're going to find is not the figure itself deteriorating, but that plastic bubble, that glue loosening and coming off. That plastic is turning yellow and coming off those cards. And it's just what happens to our collectibles. People often come into the store and say, I want buy something and I'm going to keep it in the package and never do anything with it. And I say, a lot of times what goes up in value is the stuff that people played with and the stuff that they enjoy.
Right.
It's the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys that people want to collect. Yeah, they want the high-end stuff now, right? They want the stuff that as adults that we can put on shelves, but don't necessarily expect that stuff to kind of go crazy in value as much as it is the stuff that you loved as a child.
My father-in-law, who's no longer with us, collected a lot of things, and he loved to always tell me, he would buy me things. He knew I loved Star Wars, he knew I loved Batman, and he would buy me something that said collector's item on the front, and he's like, "This will be worth a lot."
Automatically makes it not a collector's item.
And I would look at him and say, anytime it says collector's, it's not going to be worth anything because everybody's going to buy it. There's no rarity to it. And it was around that time. I mean, if you look on my shelf, the only thing that I don't have open are the Planet of the Apes figures that Richard gave us. And the reason I don't is I keep meaning to buy that damn set to put them on. And I know this. If I open them, I'll never, ever consider buying that set. Every time I see them, I think about it. And eventually one day I'm going to go, oh, I have a little bit of money. I'm going to buy that. But that's the reason they're not open. I got to the point where I was like, I don't care anymore. My collectibles are mine. I like buying my Batman. The second shelf from the bottom are Batman figures that were from Japan. Now you want to talk about those ones like where he's standing on the ledge. If you go touch them, your hands will stick to it because they use really inferior plastic and it's like gooey.
Right.
And if it gets hot,
and you got to be really careful with those over time too, because that's what's going to happen to those.
Well, if it gets hot up here, I'll come in and they'll be on the ground because they've kind of melted a little bit and fallen. But I just don't like in-box anymore. I don't find the charm to that. I like to touch them. I like to experience.
I do like the artwork. I mean, I'm a fan of that. I mean, if depending upon the item,
sometimes the packaging is part of the display, and
I don't disagree with that.
The other thing is the number of pieces that were created. So a lot of times when you see these collectible items, collector's items, packaging, whatever, they still produce 20,000 of these items. Yeah. Right, and it's going to take a long time for a lot of those to get destroyed and thrown away and burned to where you only have like 200 and they're rare. And I'm not saying that some of these high-end items don't, appreciate in value over time. They do. They do. But
if that's why you're getting them, you're probably not going to make
so let's talk about comic books. We talk about Spawn #1. We talk about the death of Superman. Those are common things that people look for, and there was a point where those were worth a lot of money, but they printed tens of
speculators were going to come
of these items.
Right.
And so, there's somebody who walks in my store every single week asking if I have a copy of The Death of Superman, but they made so many copies of them that it's $10.
Right.
And I can find them readily. And I can resell them readily, so it's a nice thing to have because it sells very, very easy, but they're not hard to find.
Right.
It's something that's a surprise, like something's killing the children or something like that, that they didn't necessarily print a whole bunch of it, but all of a sudden there's demand for it.
Walking Dead is, the first 12 issues are worth some money because they didn't print a lot of them.
Or Ultimate Spider-Man, stuff like that.
Well, then, also, you get down to autographs and signings of things, because one of the things that Sean
some people say that actually ruins the value of stuff.
And it does, because my thought was, when I learned that, is one of the first comics when I really got into it, Dark Knight had come out, and got Frank Miller to sign a copy of it. And I don't care about that kind of thing. And when I was looking through it, I looked up online. It was like, it's worth next to nothing, more than. And in fact, there were some people saying that they would pay less for it because he'd written on it. They want the pristine. Now, and then you also think, and I wonder with you with the auctions, the verification that that's the actual person signing it too has to be there, because I've got football paraphernalia over there that I know I won. Troy Aikman signing a football. I won it at an auction. Now I didn't get any paperwork, and I know it's not worth shit now because I can't prove that I didn't do it.
That is a hard one for us at the store as well. There is a resale value to something that is signed, that somebody who is walking off the street go, "Oh, Frank Miller signed this. I'd be willing to pay another $5 or $10 for this for Frank Miller to sign it." But I cannot verify that he signed it.
Right.
If somebody tries to sell it to me, I mean, unless it came with like a certificate. But then you're getting into that same thing with those expensive toys. Like what's the collector's item aspect of a signed certificate that Frank Miller signed this issue of Dark Knight #1, and what's its value ultimately? For me, and this is just me personally, a signature means I had an interaction with somebody, and it's it's valuable to me because I had this time. I had this moment of getting something signed, whether it was an autograph or a photo or a comic book, and I can say, I can frame this, say, I got to meet this person, and they signed this comic book, and it is valuable to me.
Yeah, I mean, our highest point of fraud is with like sports signatures, and so it sucks when somebody comes in and says, I paid $20,000 for this card, and we look at it and we go, well, you paid $20,000 for a fake signature. Sorry about that. So then they're mad at us because we told them that it's not real.
Yeah.
And also, you also have to consider the person who's signing, how often they sign stuff. Like Stan Lee, it's cool to get something signed by Stan Lee, but Stan Lee signed a lot of things.
He was a factory in terms of signing.
So, while the Stan Lee signature is nice to have, it's not necessarily as valuable because he signed so much stuff. But now Stan Lee's dead, so you can't get any more Stan Lee signatures. So everyone that's out there is now limited. You can't produce any more of them.
As we say this, on the wall behind us, there's a signed poster of the Police, and I would never sell that. And the reason being, my wife, Stuart Copeland, is my drumming god. When I grew up, who I modeled my playing after, Stuart Copeland, so she bid on front row tickets to let me see him, and I got to watch my god play 20 feet away from me. That is my signed proof of that moment. I wouldn't get rid of it. I don't understand selling it unless you need the money, or if you're trying to get more money so you can buy bigger things yourself.
Or you don't have the space or something.
I never got into collecting for that. Probably my biggest issue is that sometimes I'll look at it and I'm like, okay, I'm sick of that. And that's when I'll get rid of it because I'm just sick of it. But I don't look to make money on it.
One thing that we did whenever we were taking care of my wife's Uncle Michael, and he had a stroke and he had to move in with us. And in moving in, we had to sell a lot of his stuff. And he had some valuable stuff. And so how we presented to him was, you took care of this stuff your whole life.
Yeah.
Now let this stuff take care of your life so that you can get another. You're not going to have room for it.
Right.
You're getting older. You can't go up and down stairs, so you don't need a whole wing of your house anymore. So and we sold a whole lot of stuff through Heritage. And so...
Well, we did that too with my father-in-law.
Yeah.
It was that he collected all that stuff, and a lot of it was these replicas of cars, and he would buy those coins that you see online that are collector's items. But and the ironic thing was, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law reached out to a coin dealer who happened to be the fiddle player in my band. Just happened to call her, and it was like, and so there's money to be made, and we were all like, don't go with the guilt that you're selling off the things he collected. Look at it as that even though he bought collector's items, he was still investing in something that could give back to you. And with that, I actually applaud that kind of effort.
Well, and that's just it. The thing that you enjoy collecting, the passion that you have, doesn't necessarily translate to somebody else who inherits that at some point.
True.
Yeah. And it's not on them to feel guilt for not being passionate about something that you are passionate about. You had the joy of collecting and the joy of ownership of these items that meant something to you.
Right.
And at some point, time will just move everything on anyway. So
I tell Abby all the time. I mean, in this room we're in, I've got that wall of Star Wars, Batman stuff. I've got guitars all over the walls, and I'm like, when I'm gone, if there's something that you feel like you need to keep to remember me, keep it. Otherwise, sell every bit of it. The guitar in that corner is my father-in-law's.
Yeah.
That may not mean anything to her. I kept it as a tribute to my wife. He played that as a kid, and I like those kind of things. But I don't hold on to artifacts in that way. My passion for this is a passion for it. I guess I'd never thought of collecting in that way.
But and
I'm not saying I'm right or wrong.
And for me personally, having the store, seeing all of this stuff kind of come through the store, it's made my desire to hang on to things probably a little bit less than it used to be. Right?
I can see that.
Right. My stuff tends to be a little bit more. I'm a little more passionate about the few things that I do get because they mean a lot more, rather than being able to see the stuff come through all the time and getting them in homes that people would appreciate.
Right.
I don't need as much as I used to before I owned the store.
Yeah.
Well, I have to do it like every time we do it. The store he's referring to is Zeus Comics. What's the address of Zeus?
1334 Inwood Road in Dallas, Texas. You can find us at ZeusComics.com online. We do an online pull list system that comes out every Sunday. We also do a pre-order system if there are comics or graphic novels or toys that you'd like to pre-order from us. And, of course, we have just a regular old shopping cart if you want to browse our database and see what exciting comics we have.
And yes, he's my friend. Yes, I like that store, but